I am Mike Severns, and this is the Hungry Realtor Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate with at Hungry Realtor, me, Mike Severns. Joining me today is Ari Miller from Real Estate Management Advisors. Ari, how are you doing today?
Unbelievable. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. And if anybody's wondering how busy Ari is, he has 1,700 properties that he's currently managing. So getting him for this half hour is definitely a privilege and a treat. Ari, tell people about REMA and what it is exactly you do there.
Yeah, sure. We're a real estate brokerage, and we focus on property management and leasing. We essentially took the worst part of real estate, the part of real estate people hate the most, gives people the most headaches. And we basically said, yeah, we're going to own that. That's going to be all us.
Nice. I know there's plenty of owners out there that appreciate you taking that hit for them. Tell me something that would be an interesting story that you've dealt with, like an issue or a problem that sounds outlandish, but you handled it well and how you handled it.
You want to hear the most outlandish? You want to hear just like the most ridiculous?
Yeah, give us the good, Ari. That's why you're here.
I was physically attacked.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, at a security deposit hearing. Before you feel too bad, the person who attacked me was a woman. She was 9 months pregnant and was about maybe 4 feet tall.
Wow.
No, she's exaggerating. 5'2" probably. She did not like the ruling of the judge. So she flipped over her chair in court. This is down at that 12th and Chestnut. Called the judge some not nice things you probably shouldn't say to anybody, let alone a judge, and charged me.
Wow.
It was funny. I was really in danger, but it was more ridiculous and funny than anything else.
You know what? I've known quite a few shorter women in my time, and they call it, when it's a short man, they call it Napoleon syndrome. I don't know what they call it when it's a short woman, but they have a temper.
She had quite a temper. Thankfully, her boyfriend was there and eventually got her in a headlock. And none of us were too much worth for the wear. And she didn't break the chair.
All right. So if you need a bodyguard at Tenant Court, make sure to call Ari Miller.
Sheriffs were all on that stuff. Oh, yeah.
Other protecting yourself from bodily harm at Tenant Court, as a management expert, what is your philosophy when it comes to managing these properties and serving your client?
Look, there's a lot to keep in mind. The first thing, and this really impractical advice, if you want to talk about practical advice for property owners, is you have to know the law and you have to know compliance. To legally collect rent in the city of Philadelphia, you need to do a bunch of steps, and you can't skip any, and you can't wait until the tenant stops paying to think about it. If you don't have, I tell people real quick, if you want to legally collect rent, here's the basic order. First, if you open an LLC, you need to get your EIN number. Once you have your EIN number, you need to get your Philadelphia tax ID. Once you get your Philadelphia tax ID, you got to get your commercial activity license. Then you can apply for a rental license. Now, you can only get a rental license if the property was built prior to 1978, which is most rental properties. You need to have a lead certification, pass lead certification with the results need to be uploaded with the city. You need to have no violations against the property, and you need to be in tax compliance for both the property and the LLC. That means not only did you file your taxes, you had to have the LLC registered to the proper individual, really you, with the city of Philadelphia. Any of these can hold up your rental license. Once you get your rental license, you need to get your certificate of rental suitability. You need to present that to the tenant and have them sign it. You need to present the lead cert to the tenant and have them sign it. And then you can legally collect rent, along with your good housing booklet and bed bug disclosure and lead disclosure and all the other fun stuff. So you can see I give that speech before.
Yeah.
This is stuff that a lot of people, even sophisticated landlords, don't realize, don't understand, don't get. We just took over 2 buildings in West Philadelphia. The collection rate was 30%.
Wow.
They did not have the rental license. They did not have certificate of rental suitability. They did not have their lead certs. They did not have tax compliance. They were just a mess. And it's one of those things that nobody thinks about. Nobody thinks about it until you need it.
Right.
And we think about that stuff ahead of time. That way we make sure when we need it, we have it. So there are the dumb, boring stuff that you better have. Otherwise, you're going to have a major problem at some point.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that if you don't even have that stuff, even though if somebody signs a lease, you can't take them to court or go after them for any background or if they stop paying? Or does that make the eviction process harder as well if you don't have these licenses?
So if you don't have the licenses, you cannot even have an eviction. You don't even start the eviction process. You cannot
Wow.
get a court date, a judge won't hear you. And I'll give you one better. If you don't have lead compliance, which means you didn't get the property tested, you did not get the property tested for lead. You did not upload that. You did not give that lead certificate to the tenant and proof you can give them to the tenant. Not only can you not go after present rent or future rent, they are entitled for you to refund them rent they previously paid. So if right now you put in a tenant a year ago, they paid perfectly, you never tested for lead, they get some smart lawyer or all of a sudden realize the law, they can sue you, they can reclaim that year back, you're going to get a judgment against you, you're going to lose
Wow.
because you screwed up.
Man, that's crazy. I don't do a lot of rentals. Actually, I won't even lie. I don't do any rentals. Redfin does not work that space at all. We're strictly residential sales. This is great information, not only for my listeners, but for me. I didn't know this. The lead license is only a couple years old, so I haven't really researched it.
It's been around for years, but they passed a new version of it like right before COVID started. But it's one of those things where if you're a property owner right now and you don't have lead compliance, you better, it's a major problem. I know of an attorney, I'm not going to say who, that knows of a certain building, which he told me about, which did not have lead certs.
Oh, man.
And they are talking about putting together the tenant to sue the landlord to reclaim back rent.
Wow.
That's a scary proposition.
That is crazy. And this is specific to Philadelphia County?
It's specific to Philadelphia, but other townships are coming up with their own lead laws. So even though lead law is specific to Philadelphia, that's not to say it can be ignored at other places. But in Philadelphia, the ramifications, at least locally, can be severe.
Speaking of new things that are coming up and the evolution of property management, over the years, what other challenges have come up that you have had to face, and how did you deal with them?
I'm just compliance in a nutshell. So I started in the mortgage business when I was 19 years old. I know you can't tell by the gray hair and me losing my hair, but I'm 50. So it was a long time ago. At one point, if someone didn't pay rent, you evicted them, and that was really it. And what the city did is create all these different caveats where if you don't have a rental license, you're not entitled to back rent. If you don't have a certificate of rental suitability, you're not entitled to back rent. You can't even get a court date. All this is stuff that came up in the past, not so recent, but relatively recent history, where it just makes it harder and harder for a landlord who's not paying attention, who's not up on current law. So look, how I know this is I learned all these the hard way. You know how I learned that a tenant can sue you and get their money back if you can't prove that you gave them a lead cert? You can take a guess.
You got the
I
letter
was
from the
evicting
lawyer.
a tenant. They countersued us. And by the way, I had the lead cert. I just could not prove that I gave it to them. I didn't lose that case. I negotiated that case. But believe me, I read the regs and I paid attention. Every time I'd gotten lost in one of their tenant court, or maybe not even lost, but did not get what I wanted, I went and I adjusted our strategy, adjusted our lease, adjusted our compliance, adjusted our policies to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's definitely a smart move because you don't want to make the same mistake twice, especially when you're representing other people.
Yeah, especially expensive mistakes. Even if you're representing yourself, you don't want to make the same mistake twice.
Oh, absolutely. So I want to get into how we met about 10 years ago. For the audience, I had interviewed with Ari to be a property manager with his company, and he had told me that residential real estate was like hitting home runs and property management was like hitting singles. So I'm an attention seeker. I like glory, so I like hitting home runs. But so I didn't join Ari at that time, but I followed his career ever since on social media, and here and there we've spoken over the years. So the stimulation for Ari to come on the show today was a LinkedIn post that he posted about 2 weeks ago. And it really touched on how people can avoid becoming this problem tenant or in a situation where they're getting evicted by making better decisions. And I felt that in my core, because even though my parents were great parents, they really didn't know a lot about money. They didn't know how it worked. They knew you could earn it from a job by the hour and that you could spend it on groceries. And that's about it. They didn't know how to put it to work for you. They didn't know how to really save. So those habits got passed on to me. And I went through a period where I struggled a lot in my 20s. But now, like Ari, I'm not quite 50. I'm only 40. Well, I'm only going to be 45 this year.
You're looking pretty good. I guess
Yeah.
no grays.
I appreciate it. I have 3 gray hairs
Not
in my
bad.
beard that my kids, they get me, man. It's so funny. They talk about it. But I want to talk about this post a little bit. I'm just going to read the first paragraph for the listeners so they know where I'm coming from. And Ari said that for over 30 years in real estate, he has been reviewing credit, financial statements of renters, home buyers, real estate investors, and business owners. He's seen a cycle of poverty and people's poor choices that set themselves up to fail. He gave some tips for people that are struggling financially to help end that cycle. And I read through these and I said, yes, this is exactly what I had to do when I was 32 to get out of the funk I was in. And by 38, I was done and I was a success. Ari, talk to me a little bit about what you recommend people who find themselves in an unfavorable financial place and how they can get out of it.
Look, before we even get started, we have to recognize that not every unfavorable financial situation is somebody's fault.
Okay.
Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes we get hurt. Sometimes we just have situations come up, bad luck, whatever you want to call it. The first thing, it's not about blame. It's not about blaming yourself. It's just about helpful tips from stuff I've seen and experienced to advice that I can give to other people. I don't have the post in front of me, but I can just tell you some basic that I've seen is number one, if you don't need it, don't buy it. Okay. Look, certain things are nice. Vacations are nice. New clothes are nice. Fancy cars are nice. They're all nice. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. If you don't need it, don't buy it. Save your money. There's going to be rainy days. We all get sick. We all get hurt. We all have setbacks. Save your money. Even if you need it, and you have to buy it, you don't have to buy the best thing. You don't have to buy the name brand. You don't have to have the fancy thing. Nobody cares what car you drive. Nobody cares. And the people that care about what kind of car you drive, what kind of clothes you wear, honestly, you probably don't care about that. The wealthiest people I've known in my life, the real guys who worth $100 million plus, you would never know by how they dressed, how they looked, how they talked, what they drove.
Yeah. Brett Favre dresses in Wranglers, dude. It's crazy.
Cheap clothes. Who cares? It's a shirt. What does a shirt need to do? My kid's telling me about some Essentials brand of $500 a shirt. I don't know what the heck it is. I think these people are out of their mind.
My son wants the Kanye West sneakers. They're $1,000. Are you crazy?
Even though the Jordans were the bomb back in the
day.
If you can't afford it, don't buy it. There's no shame in it. You don't have to be big dog. And by the way, I've seen it so many times where somebody applied for either whether it be a house, a home loan back in the day when I was doing mortgages, or applied for an apartment, and they had some outrageous payment for something that they cannot afford. I remember one time I was talking to a guy, he was an accountant, and he lived in the suburbs and all the illusions of success. But he came to me because he was broke and he was trying to refinance his house and get a home equity loan. Then I saw he was like shopping. He had inquiries for a BMW or something like that. I'm like, what are you, crazy? I'm blunt. I'll say what I'm like, what are you, crazy? Are you out of your mind? He's like, oh, my wife said I can't drive a Honda. I'm like, don't get a new car, get a new wife.
Yeah.
It's not nuts.
Well, getting a new wife might be more expensive than getting the BMW.
You might be right. But a car needs to take you from here to there, okay? Anybody who thinks that they need something to impress someone else, nobody cares. And by the way, again, this is a little bit harder, but you can segue that into bad habits. Expensive. Even pets are expensive. I happen to, this is a sad story, but part of property management is occasionally you have to evict somebody. That's part of it. And I was talking to someone the other day. I was as compassionate as I could possibly can. This person, I just took over a building and the person was like a year behind the rent. And as I'm talking to them, they're smoking their cigarettes and they got their tattoos, which are expensive. And I hear they got a dog in there and they got a cat and they got things that are just expensive, but not necessary. And I get it. They're trying to cope with the stress of life and they're trying to look for these little outlets of joy to bring them happiness. And I totally get that. But from a financial nuts and bolts of it, expensive habits are rough.
Yeah, absolutely. I have some relatives that I try and coach through these things, but again, they're addicted to tattoos. Again, they're doing things. They have 3 dogs. The one dog's sick, and now it's a $1,200, $1,500 bill for the dog to go get something done.
I'm a dog owner. I'm not a tattoo guy, but I'm a dog owner. So I'm not against necessarily habits.
Mhm.
If you can afford a dog and you want
Right.
a dog, wonderful. If you can afford the tattoos and you want them and you think they're beautiful, it's not my thing, but okay, well, no judgment. But if you're not paying your rent and you're walking around with $5,000 worth of tattoos on your body,
Right.
maybe you should reevaluate your priorities.
Right. Or a
Again, and again, if
$1,500
that's your
phone.
priority, if you would
Yeah.
rather have that, I have no judgment. I'm just trying to give a advice on how to stay out of pocket. Credit we all know about. It's a cycle. This is what we call the cycle of poverty. If you pay your bills late, you're going to have a poor credit score.
Mhm.
If you have a poor credit score, you're borrowing. When you do need to borrow for a car or for whatever, it's going to be more expensive.
Yep.
It's why it's important to pay your bills on time. I even put something, I think I put something about just being healthy and taking care of yourself and showing up to work. And
Yeah,
you know,
reliable
that
work.
kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that was on there. Eat one, exercise. Yeah, I'm starting to get into that myself.
But I'm a
Um,
big believer in it. I try to eat healthy and exercise on a regular basis. But the fact that, again, people get sick. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, some people are unlucky and they get these crazy diseases and it's sad and it's terrible. So I'm just talking about things that are preventable.
Mhm.
If you can prevent it, try to prevent it. If you're sick more often, you're not going to perform as well at work in whatever you do. Whether you be a realtor, whether you work a regular job, whatever you do, you're not going to perform as well if you're sick, if you're feeling sluggish, if you're hangry, if you're tired, if you're grumpy. You need to fuel the body in order to do better. And the better you are, the better you're going to be, the more job security, the more job stability, more inclined for promotions, less inclined to get fired, all that kind of fun stuff.
that's absolutely true, Ari. When even in myself, if I skip lunch and it's 3 or 4 o'clock and I'm hitting the phones and I'm trying to follow up and check in with people, I definitely have a different attitude when I'm doing it, and the customers respond differently than if I'm in a great mood. I'm smiling on the phone. Maybe I have some music on in the background. Yeah, there you go.
Protein bars.
Yes.
And by the way, not only a protein bars, if you have food with you all the time, not only are you not doing, it's also cheaper.
Yeah.
You don't have to go out and spend $10, $20. Or I don't even know what they cost. I don't go out to eat so much, but you don't even need to go out and spend money on fancy meals.
So I don't know if you've seen this, Ari. I actually do another podcast with my best friend from high school. His name is Mark Fumo. We do a restaurant review show called Yo Eat This. And I will tell you, it is probably one of the most expensive endeavors I've ever gone on, because now we're going out to eat once a month, once every 2 weeks. And we're spending, I won't say what we're spending in case my wife sees this, but we're spending a healthy amount trying to get the show off the ground. But it's crazy how in the last 18 months, 2 years, prices for food have gone up. I came from the food business before I was in real estate, and I know what food cost is and how prices work in the restaurant industry. And it's crazy the amount of inflation just in the restaurant sector has been over the years.
Look, if someone can afford it, why not? Going out to eat is a luxury. Again, there's nothing wrong with luxuries. If someone
Right.
can afford a luxury, why not? This is the seasoning of life, but it's not the same.
But if you need to skip your electric bill or ask your landlord for an extra 2 weeks, then maybe not. Don't go out to eat.
Look, everyone's got to live their life how they see fit. For somebody who would rather go out to eat and risk the possibility of eviction, that might be a choice. I did a choice, and that might be the choice that some people make. It's not my choice. It's certainly a choice that someone has the ability to make.
Now, this post, you were just trying to distinguish between people's needs and their wants when it comes to spending. How do you suggest individuals apply that principle in their daily financial planning, and then take it one step further, and maybe particularly in the context of real estate investments?
Look, in terms of needs versus wants, look, we all know. We know what we need and we know what we want. And we also know sometimes we set ourselves up in a position where we do need. If we have a choice to buy a new reliable car or an older, fancier car, okay, let's say they're the same price,
Mhm.
and we choose the older, fancier car, we know there's going to be a higher propensity to break down. Then all of a sudden I'm going to need to fix it, or I'm going to need an Uber, or I'm going to need to get to work somehow. That's just a choice we're making. In terms of real estate investment, that's a different story. Investment should be investment. And I could argue that if your eventual goal for your podcast, going out to eat podcasts, and you maybe tell this to your wife if she gets on your back, is you're investing in the podcast. You can't go to White Castle every day and then do a food podcast.
No, you're absolutely right.
Go to restaurants that excite people that people are interested in. So if you do see that as a revenue generating opportunity at some point, it's an investment. There's nothing wrong with investments. Some are going to work, some aren't going to work. That's part of being an entrepreneur. But you just have to same thing. Know your numbers. You can't lie to yourself. You have to try to be honest with yourself on what really the chance of success are on any endeavor, whether it be a rental property or a food podcast or whatever else someone wants to do.
Nice. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Let me know if that works with your wife. If you
I will.
A great job.
I will. She's actually been very understanding because, again, she doesn't go. So it's just the two of us. Mark and I are going out to eat all the time. And I feel bad sometimes that I don't take her out as much as I go out with Mark. Not that I'm paying his way, but we split the bill. But
you're investing in your business.
Yes, there we go. If we take another step forward and talk about the property management, I'm really interested to know about the strategies of maintaining positive relationships with the tenants. Now that we've gotten the horror stories out of the way, how do you foster those relationships and ensure high retention rates where tenants want to stay in the properties?
Look, the step, and communication is the key for everything.
Okay.
If a tenant, let's not even talk about tenants not paying rent for a second. We'll get to that. We can get to that. But in terms of just fostering the ability to retain tenants, a lot has to do with communication. If people, and this goes beyond tenants, if people feel heard, if people feel respected, if people feel like we care about them, they're much more inclined to maintain a relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship, or a business relationship. It doesn't make a difference if it's tenant. If you're in the business of selling real estate, if somebody comes to you and they want to buy a house and they sense that you're not listening to them, whether it's true or not, but they feel it, eventually they're going to move on. It's the same thing with tenants. If a tenant has an issue and they feel like we're not addressing it, or we don't care, sometimes you can't address. Sometimes, listen, your heater's broke. I know it's cold. It's an old system. We ordered the part. We had to during COVID when the supply chain was a little screwed up,
man.
And it's not going to be here till Tuesday. I feel so bad. I'm going to send someone over to drop off some space heaters. Maybe you can't solve the problem right away, but at least you can care. Roof leaks. You can't fix. It's very difficult to fix a roof when it's raining or when there's snow on the roof. Very difficult. But what's not so difficult is explaining to a tenant, ma'am, I hear you. It's terrible that your roof's leaking. I can send someone over with a bucket. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to fix that roof in the middle of a lightning storm. It's not safe. And I just have to wait for the weather to clear in order for the roofer to fix it properly. But you can still listen and you can still talk.
Thinking about lowering your energy bills and boosting your property's value? Transition to solar power today. As a listener of the Hungry Realtor Podcast, you can unlock exclusive pricing just for you. Imagine the savings with solar. You not only cut down on electricity costs, but also enhance your property's appeal to potential buyers. Solar panels are a sustainable, smart investment that pays off in more ways than one. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Visit our website now to learn more and claim your special pricing. Go solar and see the radiant benefits shine on your investment. Act fast. Go to www.hungryrealtorpodcast.com/solar.
In terms of delinquency, and this is one of the areas where I think that also too can be complicated. If a tenant doesn't pay your rent, what do you do? Do you evict? Do you stay? Do you wait? It depends. The first thing I try to do is talk to the tenant. What's going on? Are you having a financial difficulty? Is it a permanent difficulty where you had a second job and lost it? Or you were downsized, or you were making X at a job and you got a new job making a lot less than X? Did you go through a divorce where you had two people working, now you have one? Or did you experience a temporary problem? There was a certain medical bill. There was somebody passed away in the family and nobody had money for the funeral expense. Something that you just had to do. Once you have that, then you can gauge where to go next. There are rental assistance programs available that you need to try to work with tenants and guide them in the right fashion. And remember too, you have to always remember about somebody's dignity. People get embarrassed, and making someone feel bad, cursing at them, yelling at them.
That's never going to solve anything.
There's almost no situation in life where that helps. So even when someone goes through a hardship, never a judgment. It's never angry. It's always with compassion. Even if you have to evict somebody, it can be done compassionately. It can be done with, I'm sorry it had to be this way. I really wish you the best of luck.
That's an excellent point.
Because you really have to remember, we're dealing with people's lives.
Yeah.
It's not just the rent. This is where it goes sleeping.
Well, I haven't done property management myself. I have represented investors that have bought and sold properties.
Sure.
And there is that instance sometimes where they inherit a squatter or somebody who the previous seller said was paying rent, but had paid rent for years.
It's all the time.
Yeah. And my advice is always to do what you just said, go with compassion and offer them what we call cash for keys, and a small amount to help them get set up in their next place of their next home, and I wish them luck so we can get in there and renovate and make the property attractive for a new tenant.
Look, if it's a good person who experienced, let's say, a permanent income loss, they were a couple, somebody left, somebody passed away, they can't afford it anymore. One of the nicest things you can do is put them in a place they can afford.
Yeah.
You know,
like
they
with
can't be
1,300
feeling good
units.
about their situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably you play the nutshell game. You move them around.
It's what's a right fit.
Yeah.
If you have, let's say, 4-person family and they need a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house, but then 2 of them leave
Right.
and they're still in and trying to pay for that 3 or 4-bedroom house, who will we help?
No, that makes sense.
If they can't afford it, you're not helping them. And eventually it's going to become a problem. You're not helping the landlord.
Right.
So why not deal with it in the very beginning as soon as the problem happens and say, listen, I know you like this 4-bedroom house, but maybe this 2-bedroom apartment that's $700 a month cheaper is just a much better fit for you right now. You can always upsize again in the future. But once your credit's bad, once you have an eviction on your record, it becomes much tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. This is all great advice for tenants. I want to talk a little bit more about the investors and the owners there, the landlord.
Sure.
Who is somebody that is like your perfect customer, right? Is the one guy with one property, is that somebody that should be calling Ari Miller? Or is it just somebody who has multiple properties that really needs help?
So in all honest answer, it's going to say, I don't know how to say it and not I'm going to try and say it in the nicest possible ways. It really depends on how much time they have.
Okay.
How much time they need, I should say. How much time they need from me.
Okay.
Most of my clients, my average client probably owns 25 to 30 units at a guest. And we have many that have many more. Now, that's not to say we don't have clients that have one unit. We do. But the economics are such that I just can't give them a ton of time. I'm happy to talk to them and happy to give anyone advice, even if they have no properties with them. But that's just the reality.
No, that's a great answer. And that's an honest answer that I was looking for, because I'm sure that some of my listeners and watchers out there are investors. And I want to make sure that if they need property management, they know you're the person to go to and who they are that would be able to get your help.
Yeah, sure. So what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about PHA, Section 8? You want to talk about crazy tenant stories?
Let's talk about Section 8. I get a lot of questions about Section 8. I'll give you my philosophy on Section 8 as a real estate agent and what I see going on from the investors that I help. And then you tell me your view, and I want to see if they match. So I feel that when someone has a Section 8 horror story where the tenants had dogs or cats or whatever, and they destroyed the property, they trashed the house, I more or less blame that on that landlord, because every lease should have a monthly safety inspection where they're going in to do the fire extinguisher, the smoke detectors, checking all that stuff. And at the same time, they can go in and make sure that the property is in good shape. If somebody leaves somebody for a year, 2 years, 5 years in a property, never sees them and just collects the money from the government, and then they go in and the whole place needs to get renovated, I feel that's on them. They don't have a good property manager. So now, or they're not a good landlord. Now you tell me how you deal and how you think about Section 8.
So we do a fair amount of Section 8. We're one of the largest, I think we're one of the largest third-party Section 8 managers. Look, Section 8 tenants are like any other group of people. There are people that are the nicest, sweetest people in the world. There are a percentage of people who are maniacs. And then there's average people in between. So obviously, my philosophy is I always want the nicest, sweetest people in the world. And I'd rather not have maniacs in my properties, no matter if they have a Section 8. Look, it's a little unfair because sometimes certain landlords get to the mistake that it's a tough situation because on one hand, you have a valid point with regular inspections. But what if the tenant is destroying the property?
So now you talk to the sheriff, right? If they're actively destroying the property,
to them. What if they don't care?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that sounds really nice, but meanwhile, you're
How is it in
locked
practice?
into your
That's
lease.
what I'm curious about.
What's that?
How is it in practice? That's what I'm curious about.
Section 8 leases are 2-year leases. In order to evict somebody in Philadelphia, you need to have what's called good cause.
Okay.
You can't just evict somebody if you don't like them.
Destroying the property sounds like a good cause.
What that?
Destroying the property sounds like a good cause, right?
You better be able to prove it.
Okay.
Section 8 tenants too. Also, if they break a door, let's say, very clear they broke it, punched a hole in the door, not took an axe, shredded. You got to pay for that door, and you got to put it back. Otherwise, Section 8 is going to cut off your money. Look, it's just part of the deal. Obviously, do your best in terms of tenant placement, and making sure that you put good people in. Obviously, but it's a challenge. I think Section 8 again. I don't dislike it. I don't like it. We do a lot of it. We do a lot of non-Section 8 tenants. We do more non-Section 8 tenants than we do tenants. So it really comes down to the tenant and the quality of tenant, but also too, it's the same thing. If the tenant feels like you don't care about them, they're not going to care about you.
You said that you had asked if we wanted to talk about crazy tenant stories. So what is the weirdest thing that you found in one of your properties that you managed from a tenant?
The weirdest?
Yeah.
Look, if in enough properties, you find absolutely everything. You find dead bodies.
No, you never found a dead body.
Of course.
Oh my God.
It doesn't happen. I'll tell you the crazy thing of it. Okay. Not crazy. It's not the crazy, but it was one crazy funny story. So this is maybe 2 years ago. It's an apartment building. I start getting texts pretty early in the morning that from a tenant on the 2nd floor that there's water coming from her bathroom on the 3rd floor. Coming from her ceiling, and there's a 3rd floor tenant above. So I start texting the 3rd floor tenant, hey, with exactly that, what's going on in your bathroom? A lot of times it's someone overflows the sink, someone overflows the tub, someone overflows the toilet. Sometimes there's a leak, but it is what it is. I'm texting her, not responding. So texting her, calling her, emailing her, not responding. It's getting to the point where it's now 8 o'clock or so. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to head over there. Maybe she's out of town and maybe she's just not around. And okay. So I start knocking on the door, pounding on the door, boom, calling her name. Hey, property manager. Nothing. Texting, calling, nothing. So finally, I text her. I said, listen, it's just a plumbing emergency. The water's coming. I need to go in. I text her. Usually, you can't enter someone's unit indiscriminately. But if there is an emergency and a broken supply line, water coming to the next door apartment is considered an emergency, you can go. Unlock the door. I open it. There's a chain on the door from the inside.
Oh, no.
So now, right away, I'm thinking, okay, probably dead. Okay? He's not, but okay, let's go on. Okay, I now have a choice. I can either break the chain and go in. I'm screaming her name. Screaming. Yeah. I said, you know what? I'm going to call the police. Okay? They call the police. They come out. It's actually in the point of the township. Pretty quick. And hey, he asked me because he can't just break it down necessarily. I said, listen, I got a crowbar, boom, boom, boom. We go in. I think I walked in first somehow. I don't know why I walked in first. I walked in first. I walk in to the right. If you walk in, the bathroom's to the left and the living room's to the right. I walk in. I see her and a guy lying naked, and one of their hands is around the other person's throat.
Oh my God.
So I just turn around and walk right back out. Of course, the end of the story, they were so drunk and on so much drugs that they had a night of so much fun that they actually broke the bathroom sink in their effort. And they were just not dead, thank God, but dead to the world.
Oh my God.
Finally, he woke them up. I was able to go into the bathroom and turn the water off. Later that day, I sent a plumber over to fix the broken sink. And shockingly, she never called me again and moved out like a month or two later.
Yeah, she was probably mortified.
Out of embarrassment. That's one of the crazy stories.
Wow.
We got plenty, but it was definitely an interesting morning.
It's funny that you say that. I won't say his name, but when I first got my license, I only did New Jersey. And I walked into a vacant property and there was another agent there that hadn't had who wasn't scheduled to show it. I had the showing scheduled and he was in there with his mistress.
It happens.
Vacant property. Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't his listing, but he knew the code because he had shown it before and thought it would be empty because it was early in the morning.
Cheaper than motels.
Oh my God. I did the same thing. I walked in, I saw 4 feet and I was like, oh, that's not right. I'm going to walk back out. And then he comes running out, buttoning his pants. And I'm sorry. Are you showing this house? I said, yeah. Is the client here yet? I said, no, I go in and turn the lights. Luckily, no client didn't see them.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, please don't say nothing yet. So if you're out there, I never said anything about you specifically, but I am telling the story all the time because
you're a good man.
Yeah.
You're a good man. No, but unfortunately, you see all kinds of crazy things, drugs, prostitution, and you see, again, usually in buildings when we're taking over, not tenants we're blazing. But you see all kinds of craziness. That's just part of the thing. We had someone who bought a cat owner, a diligent pet owner, who, I don't know if she saw like the city kitty on Shark Tank and was trying to train her cat to go to the bathroom.
Oh,
but
I saw that.
decided it was a good idea to pour hard clumping cat litter down the toilet.
Oh, no.
Now, like concrete.
How much did that cost?
Next thing you know, they have a drain problem. We can't stay. The snake's not getting through. And eventually, we literally broke the line. We broke the sewer line.
Yeah, you replaced the whole thing then, right? Yeah, it's crazy.
Thankfully, it wasn't like the entire stack, but it was a portion of it.
Okay.
I think it was just in the basement when it like sat and made the turn.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, people do all kinds of crazy things, most of the time without knowing. I'm sure she didn't realize it. I don't think she did it maliciously. Even though sometimes people do things maliciously. I had a tenant leave, and I'm pretty sure purposely on an eviction, and the sheriff was there, and he was like the last person, and we waited for him to get his stuff. And somebody, I don't remember why, but one of us had the idea, this is a building, by the way, too, to double back, and the gas was on in the stove.
Oh, wow.
This guy, on his way out, just turned the gas on and walked out. And thankfully, I don't remember if it was me or the sheriff or somebody had the idea, or the locksmith said, I don't know if he smelled, hey, I'm going to just check on it, because that would have been a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a customer of mine, a landlord. He had college students and he had evicted them. And then they broke in after. Like he had started fixing the place up and they went through a basement window. And then with the bathroom all over the place, they broke the walls. They plugged up sinks in the toilet, not the toilets, tubs, and they overflowed. And he doesn't know if it was the same kids that he evicted, but the timeline kind of fits.
It's tough sometimes.
Yeah.
But look, we tell the fun stories, but just to not scare landlords off. This is the 0.1%. 99% of people are good and they're nice. They're trying to live their lives and do their thing.
That brings me to my next question, Ari. What advice do you have for the individuals that are new to property ownership and new to renting out things and have to look for tenants for the first time? You said in your previous story that most of these stories come from places that you take over, but the tenants you place are good tenants.
We make mistakes too sometimes. Okay. I wish I could say we're batting 1,000, but we're not.
All right, but you're probably a Hall of Fame hitter.
I hope so.
What can they do to help avoid these problems up front?
Look, there's really 4 judgeable criteria. Credit, criminal background, previous evictions, and just to go through them real quick. Credit, if you look at someone's credit, you got to at least think they're going to pay the rent. Look, you don't know about the future, but if every bill they've ever had, didn't pay, that's a problem. Now, again, that's not to say if they had a bad credit score, you can't make an exception. It really depends on what happens. If you saw for years they paid their bill, then there was a 6-month period where they didn't pay their bills, and after that they paid their bills, and you ask them what happened, you're like, oh, I got really sick then. Oh, that makes sense. That doesn't indicate that they're a bad pay, so you have to look at credit.
Hey, real estate investors and business owners, are you looking for exclusive, unsecured funding to grow your business? Look no further than MB Capital Solutions. At MB Capital Solutions, we specialize in providing the financial support you need with no collateral required. That's right, unsecured funding with competitive rates and fast approvals. Don't miss out on this opportunity to take your business to the next level. MB Capital Solutions, in partnership with the Hungry Realtor Podcast, is empowering your business to thrive. Act now by going to www.hungryrealtorpodcast.com/funding to apply today.
One, criminal background. Look, everyone has to have different policies for criminal background, and you have to check your compliance regarding what you can and what you cannot turn someone down for. But murderers, rapists, child sex offenders.
Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to not rent to sex offenders if they're on the Megan?
I think you can. Other offenses, maybe you can't discriminate against, but you have to. But the laws are set up to where, look, if someone, there was a law that let's get the eviction first,
Okay.
and then we'll go into that a little bit. So anyway, there's also the people who are like habitually getting into trouble. Someone who's just a bad luck.
Right.
It's the Bronx tale, the mush. Someone who constantly is in the wrong place at the wrong. Look, you have to consider whether you want to rent these people. Not to say they don't deserve a place to live. They do deserve a place to live, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Income. This is the most important. If somebody cannot afford the place, they could be the nicest, sweetest, most wonderful person in the world. They're not going to be able to pay it. It's what it is. Rampant leases, previous eviction. You look, a previous eviction should certainly give you cause and why a landlord took them to court. That's not to say it automatically means they're a bad tenant, but it should certainly give you pause. Now, there is a law in the books in Philadelphia where you cannot deny someone housing solely because they had an eviction during COVID.
Oh, interesting.
But what that means is, if you have someone who has perfect credit and doesn't have a bad criminal background and makes 3 times rent and had an eviction during COVID, you can't deny them. But chances are you wouldn't deny that person.
Right.
And honestly, the chances of someone maintaining perfect credit and getting evicted at the exact same time is probably slim. Chances are, if they got evicted, they weren't paying their bills.
Right.
So it's one of those laws in the books where
So you say, "Oh, I'm evicting you because you got bad credit, not because you have the eviction."
basically, yes, it's like you can't deny, you can't have a height risk. You can't not let someone become a sumo wrestler if they're under 4 feet tall.
Right.
It's okay. That may be true, but find me a 4 feet tall sumo wrestler, and then we can talk about it. So that's that tenant placement. But again, and we touched on a little bit in terms of laws and regs. But one of the important factors is you should have a written approval process and policies on minimum credit scores on these things. Because what you don't want to do is not have a policy, always wing it, and then open yourself up potentially to a possible discrimination lawsuit.
Right.
If you should not have different policies for people based on race, religion, disability.
Yeah, I always told people that if you're denying it, well, I did rentals in my first couple of years before I was with Redfin. If you're going to deny this person, you have to make sure that whatever criteria you're using to deny them, that's across the board, that somebody with the same criteria is going to be denied no matter what.
100%. And it's not just a way to stay out of discrimination litigation. It's a way to live live an immoral life. Honestly, if you're denying people based on sexual orientation or based on whatever, gender identification, or based on anything that has nothing to do with pay the rent, you're a jerk.
I agree.
Again, not judging anyone's personal beliefs. Everyone has their entitled to their own beliefs. But in terms of a tenant, who cares?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're running up against it here, Ari, but I really want to touch base on, you had said we were going to talk about evictions. So I want to touch base on the eviction process and how you help with that for your client, and then any advice that you have for people that may not have somebody like you in their corner.
So the first step, as we touched on, is compliance. You need to get to the point where you have your rental license, you have your certificate of rental suitability, you gave it to the tenant, you have a copy of your lead cert, both the front page and the results, you gave it to the tenant, you can prove that you gave the tenant, you gave the good housing booklet to the tenant, the bed bugs addendum, the leads addendum, you did the right thing. At that point, a tenant doesn't pay. What do you do? So even before you start evicting, first step is talk to the tenant, find out what's. If it seems like it's just a short-term hiccup, maybe work with them. If it seems like it's a long-term problem, the first thing you have to do, and this is where you have to separate between the city of Philadelphia and other places. In the city of Philadelphia, you have to file for mandatory eviction diversion mediation. So what happens then is you file, it doesn't go against their court record yet. You have to send them a certain disclosure, letting them know what they're supposed to do. The city will also reach out to them. Assuming the tenant cooperates, they'll be assigned a housing counselor. And then the housing counselor, the tenant, either you or your representative, the property manager, a lawyer, somebody, and a mediator gets on a call and discusses the situation and say what's going on. And I found them to, if the tenant cooperates, I found them to be very successful. Because sometimes just getting people to talk, you can resolve a lot.
Yeah.
Also, that opens up to TFA, targeted financial assistance, where tenants can get rental income to get caught up and avoid it. This is really the best scenario because you don't want to evict. They cost money. They don't want to get evicted, certainly. But let's assume this all fails. For argument's sake, obviously, if they get caught up and get back on track, wonderful. You don't have an eviction. But let's assume this all fails. If it fails, you have to take them to court. If you have a tenant that's just not paying and not participating in eviction diversion and not doing their part to get rental assistance, you go to court. I recommend using an attorney. It's very complicated down there. People can't do it themselves. It's not, but I would recommend, but certainly their option. You go to court. Unfortunately, it's a long process. Even after eviction diversion, you'll probably get a court date within 30 days. The first hearing very rarely happens. People can get continuances for no reason whatsoever, or the dumbest of reasons. And then that'll get them a 30 to 45 day continuance. After that, you may have a hearing on your hands. You have a choice. You could either negotiate what's called a JBR, judgment by agreement, or let your attorney do it for you. In which case, it basically, you're agreeing you owe it, and we're coming up with some sort of terms. You'll pay back in certain intervals or whatever it is. And that becomes a court record. If that happens, then it's if the judge ordered it, because the judge has to approve it, which they always do. If not, you go in front of the judge and you state your case. Then the judge will issue a ruling. There's a 10-day appeal period. Assuming nobody assuming the ruling in your favor, and assuming they don't appeal, at that point, you can file for a lockout. But this could go sideways, and sideways means that the tenant files a fair housing for a fair housing. If they file for a fair housing and say you did something wrong, you didn't have your rental license, you didn't do a certain repair, they can take the matter to a different court in front of an arbitration panel, and you present your case to the arbitration panel.
Oh, wow.
They'll usually schedule something within 30 to 60 days. And after the hearing, they'll take another 30 to 60 days to respond. And at that point, you can appeal their hearing, or their hearing is binding. If it's binding, then you can go back to landlord-tenant court. There were some cases, and a new law passed in Philadelphia regarding lockouts, sheriff lockouts or lockouts from the landlord-tenant officer, which now they have to double up. They're bringing 2 people at a time, which means double the price. But the lockouts will take you another 60 to 90 days from the time the hearing goes. And from the time you file, not the hearing, after the appeal period when you file. After that, you either need to store the tenant stuff at the property, or you need to move it off site for another 30 days. And then you get your house back.
So you're talking 9 months to a year, at least.
If someone doesn't pay in January, the reality is, if you're standing in that house in September 1st, you're probably owed 10. That's just the process. Now, again, this is assuming you have all the right stuff.
Right.
If you don't have the rental license or the CRS or the lead cert or anything like that, it's a sad reality, but it is the reality. The key is just knowing it, and then helping. And then once you know it, it's just, okay, these are the rules.
Yeah, you just got to set yourself up so it doesn't become a problem in the future, just like you said in the beginning of the show.
Again, if any investors out there are feeling nauseous right about now, the good news is that this doesn't always happen. Most tenants pay their rent. Even after a tenant doesn't pay their rent, and you're starting down the road of delinquency, you can always talk to them and just say, listen, I don't want to file eviction. Okay, it's going to cost me money. It's going to be on your record. It really doesn't do any of us. Maybe it's better if you just leave. And sometimes that's successful. Or as you say, cash for keys. Listen, I'll even pay you to be on your way. Sometimes, even though it's hard to emotionally do, especially when you're already losing money in the rent.
But it's less expensive than the attorney.
It's sometimes the best economic answer. So it's a challenge. But again, these are the 1% of cases, the 2% of cases. Most tenants don't end up in eviction, thank God, for Us, for them, for landlords, for everybody.
Ari, I want to let the listeners and viewers out there know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. You can always just go to my website, which is reinfo411.com. You can always email me at arimiller@reinfo411.com, or like me on LinkedIn and reach out like you did, and and we can have a nice podcast.
Awesome. I appreciate your time. You were very generous with it. We've been here almost an hour. I want to thank you so much. And again, for everyone out there, this has been Real Estate with at Hungry Realtor, me, Mike Severns. Please follow and subscribe, and make sure to check out Ari Miller on LinkedIn. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
And that wraps up another episode of the Hungry Realtor Podcast.